So is Netflix taking over boxing? And how does Canelo cash in 150 million? Is Netflix the new champion in boxing? And will streaming defeat pay-per-view, or will they operate side by side in the boxing jungle? This, of course, is a very interesting conversation. So let's try and understand this. So why was it so successful? Why was it so successful? And in answering that question, I think we need to look at the fan bases of both fighters. So if you take Canelo, you have a big star, a massive star, especially in the Mexico and Latin communities worldwide. He is a national hero. He's a national hero in Mexico, and he has a strong US Hispanic viewership. Additionally to all of that, he has big audiences not only in Europe, but also in Asia. So that's what Canelo's bringing to the table. And then you have Crawford's fan base, which has an appeal to the boxing purist. And additional to that, he brings in African American sports audiences, particularly in the US. So when you put Canelo's fan base and Crawford's fan base together, you have this momentum. And you also have what I call a narrative appeal. And the narrative appeal of this fight was, who is the best? And who is the best pound for pound? And that is such an appealing title. Who is the best boxer? And that's what this fight brought to the table. Canelo, an elite boxer. Crawford, an elite boxer. But who's better? And then we have this notion of accessibility. Because when you bring Netflix into the equation, you have global accessibility. And part of that global accessibility is because you don't have the additional pay-per-view cost. So is Netflix a global powerhouse? Or to rephrase the question, is Netflix a global powerhouse within the boxing context? They say that numbers don't lie. And if that premise is correct, then the 41 million viewership for Canelo and Crawford is very impressive. As stated beforehand, there's no pay-per-view barrier, and this is extremely appealing. And then behind every big event, you could argue, is big economic backing, and there are big partners in this event. You have the UFC backing, and then you have the Saudi investment. And then you have the global reach of Netflix, which is not 1 million, it's not 100 million, it's not 150 million, it's not 200 million, it's 300 million subscribers worldwide. So in a sense, Netflix is it's becoming a boxing powerhouse. And it's the new lion in the boxing jungle. And of course, there are other lions like DAZN, Showtime, SBN, Sky Sports Boxing, etc. But Netflix is entering the boxing arena, and the viewership and the money being generated is definitely impressive. So did Netflix make a loss? Did they make a loss? Now, to describe this, I'd like to introduce the following example. Let's take Jack, and let's say Jack has a company, and Jack's company makes 3 million. Sounds impressive. But if Jack's company spent 6 million, they made a loss. They made a loss of 3 million. Why is this important? It's important because it's always relevant to know the net profit. So what is the profit after the expenses? Within the Netflix boxing context, we don't have enough information to answer that question. We do, however, have the following information. The live gate was reportedly 47 million. That is a staggering amount. And what's equally staggering is the fight purses. Crawford made a respectable $10 million, and Canelo allegedly made $150 million. These are massive purses. So clearly, a lot of money was made. But additionally, a lot of money was paid out. I'm assuming that Netflix is looking at this event as an opportunity, as an investment opportunity. And there's other metrics as well, or there's another metric. And this is how many people subscribed because of the fight. So how many people subscribed to Netflix because of the fight? Because Netflix is a subscription model. That's their economic business model. And also there's other metrics. There's the obvious economic victory. So if you invest 100 million, but then you make 200 million, that's a economic victory. But then there's the cultural impact. And certain fights or certain events, they might not just make loads of money, they might make a big cultural impact. So when we look at the impact of Canelo Crawford, it's important not just to look at the financial metrics, but also to look at the cultural impact, because that's another important metric as well. So how was Canelo able to make 150 million? Initially, I felt sorry for Canelo because he was beaten. But did you really lose if you made 150 million? But that put aside, let's look at two big paydays in boxing to try and get a bigger picture. So if we look at the two biggest paydays in boxing, the first one was Floyd Mayweather versus Conor McGregor. Now, of course, Floyd Mayweather was an elite level boxer. Some may consider the greatest of all time. And Conor McGregor was an elite level UFC fighter. They were both, additional to this, huge brands. In that fight, Mayweather made 280 million and Conor made 130 million. Again, this is a staggering amount of money. The second biggest fight was Floyd Mayweather versus Manny Pacquiao. Again, Floyd Mayweather was an elite boxer and Manny Pacquiao was also an elite boxer, and this was seen as the rivalry. This was seen as like the ultimate test for Floyd Mayweather. And in that fight, Mayweather made 250 million and Manny Pacquiao made 130 million. Now, when we look at the Canelo purse, it's, to my understanding, 150 million for a 3-fight deal with Netflix. Now, it's important to understand that if Netflix is going to pay that type of money, how are they going to recoup? And obviously, Netflix has a subscription-based model. So here's simple maths. Here's a theoretical example. So if a Canelo event, let's say this Canelo event, this boxing match convinced 2 million people to subscribe and they join at, let's go with American currency, $15. That means 350 million has been generated. So if you invested 150 million, but then you make 350 million, you've made more than double your profit. So that would be a good investment. So only time will tell on whether Netflix have recouped on that investment. And here's another important part, because the actual payment structure for Canelo, from my understanding, isn't as straightforward as you might think. There's 4 different payment structures. So you've got the rider season, so that's the Saudi investment. So basically that's one source of the 150 million. Then you got obviously Netflix, that's the second source. Then you've got corporate sponsors, that's the third source. And then you've got the Livegate, which is the fourth and final source. And remember, the Livegate brought in a staggering 47 million. So hopefully this can shed some light on how Canelo can make such a substantial amount of money. So I think this is a really important question. And that question is Netflix, is it good for boxing? Or alternatively, is Netflix bad for boxing? And as in most cases, there are pros and there are cons. So let's look at some of the pros. So Netflix brings in a huge audience. For example, the Crawford Canelo fight brought in 40 million in regards to viewership. Additionally to this, there is no pay-per-view price entry because it's a subscription model. Also, Netflix is currently providing great economic opportunities, and that's evidenced by the fact that they're paying Canelo 150 million. And another part of Netflix is that it has that global reach, which is exponential. And that current global reach isn't 100 million, it's not 200 million, it's 300 million. So the global reach is massive. And also there's the potential, because of that global reach, to really raise a boxer's profile. So these are the these are the pros of the relationship of Netflix and boxing. But with any aspect, there's always potential cons. And one of the potential cons, well, it's a question: is the 100+ million purses, are they sustainable, or are they unsustainable? Only time will tell with regards to if they can recoup on their investment. Another issue, and this happened in the Mike Tyson Jake Paul fight, is the streaming glitches, which of course affects the live experience. And then additional to this, can they sustain, they being Netflix, can they sustain this long term? And then we look at the payment structure. And is the payment structure fair? Is the payment structure fair? So if boxer A makes 150 million and boxer B makes 10 million, how much do the other boxer makes? How much do the other boxers make? So does boxer C make millions, or do they make substantially less? And is that pay disparity fair? What is a fair payment for boxers that support the main event? Because can there be a disparity that's too much? Clearly, you're going to have a disparity. I mean, you have a disparity between 150 million and 10 million. But what's a fair disparity between the main event and the supporting boxing events that are leading up to the main event? And also, the streaming glitches are extremely important. And again, as I stated, the Mike Tyson, Jake Paul, they had buffering and streaming issues. And apparently these issues happen because when you have massive events, you have what you call peak demand spikes. So for example, when you take the Mike Tyson and Jake Paul fight, there was a 60 million viewership. That's right, a 60 million viewership. And for want of a better word, this would have stressed their technological infrastructure. So it's essential that they being Netflix, have the technology to support this type of viewership. So as we can see, boxing and Netflix, it has the potential to be a good or great relationship, but there's also the potential for it to be a not so good relationship. So Netflix, it could be positive for boxing. I mean, culturally, it brings new eyeballs to the sport, and this is a good thing. Additional to this, it creates new economic opportunities, and hopefully the pay structure can be maintained. And also, hopefully the fights will continue to be of an elite level. And as long as the pay structures are fair, there is a real opportunity that this could be a successful relationship. But in the end, the business will determine its future. But at the same time, don't underestimate cultural impact. Ultimately, only time will tell.